Hello and welcome to Robinson Hall Experts Talk. Today we are going to be talking about farm diversification, making the most of your assets. And I have three experts with me. I have David Sawford, who's partner and head of planning and building and project consultancy. David has extensive knowledge of planning, construction methods and building use types, both in design and project management of building works. I have David Watling, who is associate and head of commercial property. David is involved in all aspects of commercial property, including valuations, management, acquisitions and disposals. And lastly, Alice Brodie. Alice is an associate and rural charter surveyor. She works with landowners and farmers on a range of matters within farm and estate management. So welcome everyone. First things first, why is farm diversification so important?
So farm diversification is becoming increasingly important, especially over sort of the last 10 years. We've seen it across the sort of local area, a lot of farm diversification on a range of different holdings. It's very much to be seen as something to enhance farm incomes from other sources other than your conventional wheat crops, livestock. It's so that different people can be brought into the farming business. It's making the most of your farm assets. Recently we've seen basic payment scheme reductions in that over the last few years. This year, 2024, we've got de-linked payments, so payments are now 50% of what they would have been. That is a massive reduction for a lot of farms, and it's a serious consideration in terms of the bottom line and something that needs to be considered and addressed by all, so that the future is something there for the next generation or for new agreements, and to ensure that the holding can continue. Alongside that, we've got rising costs, lower market prices. Always the weather is an issue and something that worries farmers day to day. Energy security and sustainability, and also the fact of changing consumer attitudes. So farmers need to be addressing the public and be seen to be with the times. So if that's addressing sustainability or energy and bringing the public onto their farm is in quite a few cases key, and ensures that farming is there for everyone.
Do you think that farmers are kind of considering diversification even more so now because of the changes to the government payments?
Yeah, I think the reduction in BPS is a massive driver. Where we are, predominantly arable, they are some of the most hard hit, the ones who are most hard hit by the loss in BPS. A lot of some people can carry on as they were if they've got high income from crops and they have a high acreage, but for the smaller farm it's going to be increasingly difficult, and it's a case of taking a step back and having a look and seeing how else you could get some of that crucial income in by using the skills, the buildings, the location, the factors that you have that can essentially diversify and bringing that additional income that is going to be crucial going forward.
So if you're a farmer and you possibly need a little bit of advice as to how to diversify, what options are available?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, we've all seen lots of different options. I think you can sort of boil it down to four sort of, I suppose, main themes. So you've got adding value to farm produce. So that might be having, the classic case is having like a milk vending machine, selling direct from your farm, selling online, having that sort of direct contact with the market. You could have a new enterprise. So if you're in a lovely spot near some beautiful views, you could have glamping, camping, you could do something for leisure and recreation. Interlinked with that is like your buildings, you're developing the buildings. So could you, taking a step back, could you develop a building into a holiday let? Could it be used for storage, for residential, for workshop? And then farm energy. So increasingly, and with the new government, there's been a proper shift to looking at renewables. So is that solar, wind, anaerobic digestion? There's it's a big step. It needs a lot of thought, but there are options out there for every scale of farm, and it's just something that it might not be for you, but it's just something to be considered.
Andrew Jenkinson and Polly also did a podcast on renewable energy, so if that is something that you're interested in, it would be worth having a listen to that. It sounds like with all these options, because there's so many, I guess key is making sure that it works with your farm if you do want to carry on farming as well.
Yes, I think I'll just interject there and say the key driver for a lot of farmers are, they want to continue farming and bring in this diversified commercial income stream, but the impact on the farming enterprise needs to be really carefully considered, i.e. the general public coming into the farmyard, potentially if you have a farm shop, so that's one key point to consider, and then the viability and whether planning consent is required or whether to proceed without planning consent. Obviously we advise going for planning consent, and some options are easier from a planning permission perspective, with the prior approval class R for commercial flexible use, but ultimately it's viability, which David will touch on.
Clearly you've got to assess the cost of carrying out any conversion works allied to the demand. Storage uses are less costly to convert because you can basically use the building that you've got. You may have to improve the power of the lighting and such, like perhaps electrify the doors, but other than that you're ready to go. Clearly other uses such as office use, there are more costs involved, so it's important that at the initial stage you get an accurate assessment of the cost involved.
So what if a farmer just doesn't know where to start? Can we do a site visit and give them some guidance?
Absolutely, and that is probably the starting point to carry out a feasibility study. Obviously, we would discuss it with the landowner, and they may well have hard and fast thoughts in terms of what they do not want to see on their holding and what they would be flexible to and amenable to. So we can carry out a feasibility study to look at what options there are from a planning perspective, cost viability, and actually the market, to see what other people are doing locally. If there's an abundance of farm shops in a particular area, then clearly we're not going to suggest setting up another farm shop.
Yeah, if you're near Dalesford, don't set up a farm shop within 5 minutes. It's a case of looking at the geographical location, looking at what you can do, but also what the market is and what the competitors are doing, because it's a big jump and you want to be fully informed before you put that money and that time into it.
Thank you, Alice. You touched on planning, David Sawford, and you did mention that obviously not all projects potentially require it. You also mentioned that there would possibly be an option of permitted development rights. Did you want to explain more?
To be clear, most projects will need planning, but we are aware that a lot of property owners do let buildings out without the full planning change of use, and clearly the income you get from the building will be affected if you let it as it is as an agricultural building versus getting the proper change of use and getting an enhanced rent.
Yeah, David, we find that some of our farmer clients go down the storage route because that's the easiest option, no real costs involved, and there is good demand for storage at the moment. There's a shortage of buildings on established estates, and one of the benefits that incoming tenants will find is that they're not paying business rates if they're taking an agricultural building. So there is demand, but it needs to be looked at carefully, and there is also obviously the risk that enforcement action can be taken against you.
Yeah, but clearly, depending on the use, so that for general storage where you're not putting a lot of capital into changing the building, then it depends how risk averse you are, but that might be an option. But where you're putting a lot of capital in and carrying out a lot of adaptations, the likes of holiday accommodation, clearly that's going to need planning consent, because you're not going to carry out that work at risk without getting the required consent. And the prior approval schemes for conversion of agricultural buildings have helped significantly with getting planning consent for that type of use. So holiday accommodation is a commercial enterprise, and we would advise going for Class R, which is agricultural to commercial flexible use, for the change of use, and then following that up with a full application for the physical operational works, which is a lot simpler than the old route of going for full planning consent for that type of operation, as it circumnavigates a lot of the local plan policies that you have to tick the box, particularly in relation to development outside the settlement envelope and development in the open countryside.
I guess it could potentially be quicker as well.
Probably not a huge amount quicker, because obviously you've got the change of use prior approval application and then a follow-up full planning application, but much more chance of success.
Right.
But the timeline for getting the consent will probably be very similar in reality.
Is there anything that a landowner or farmer could do to aid a successful planning outcome when they're looking at diversification projects?
Yes. If planning consent is going to be required, then it can quite often be very helpful after carrying out the feasibility study to do a pre-application inquiry to the local authority. That will drive out from the local authority the important factors that they're going to be considering, which allows you to address them in the initial application, to prevent having to withdraw applications and amend them and then resubmit them. So that is often useful, absolutely, and that will effectively streamline the planning process if you've got the local authority's opinion and major factors from the outset.
And are we finding that the councils are very positive about farm diversification? Are they looking at the projects and the planning applications in a good light?
I think it's a real mixed bag, local authority to local authority. We do a lot of prior approval applications, and the vast majority are successful and go very well. There's the odd local authority that are quite resentful of the prior approval process because it circumnavigates their planning policies, and they seem to be quite negative against anything that goes for prior approval. But that's, I think, a minority rather than the norm.
And you touched on storage, David Watling, and obviously you're seeing some farmers go down that road because it's a bit simpler. What kind of rents are you seeing? Have you got any examples?
Yeah, I mean, it does clearly vary upon the condition of the building to start with, the specification and location, but generally within this area, for larger, when I say larger, I probably mean buildings of in excess of 10,000 square feet or circa 1,000 square metres. It's £3 to £4 per square foot per annum. But for buildings ranging from 1,000 square feet up to say 5,000 square feet, we're generating rental incomes in the order of £5 to £6 per square foot per annum. And these are for buildings that have no formal planning permission.
Okay.
And what would the enhanced value be if you have planning permission and are therefore able to give the tenants much more security? What would the enhanced value be?
It's a very good question, David, and I would suggest that for the larger buildings that's more important, because if you're going to move an existing business, let's say, from a smaller building into a 10,000 square foot plus unit, you want security. You want to know that you're not going to be approached by a local authority at any stage to say, hang on a minute, what are you doing here? So I would suggest that for a larger building, and again, 1,000 square metres, 10,000 square feet plus, where the rent might be £3, £4 a square foot, I would expect it to be £5 to £6 per square foot as a minimum with consent. And for a smaller building, again, you would see an uplift of circa 10-20% on your rental income with a permission.
So you could argue it's worth getting the permission.
Absolutely. It gives everyone certainty and added income.
So Alice, you touched on earlier in the podcast that there's various options for farmers. Do you have any examples of farm diversification projects we've worked on?
Yes, so obviously we've been talking about storage. That is a very popular option, and a lot of farmers where they have got those spare buildings, it is sort of seen as the easier option. We have been involved recently with assisting landowners and the business owner in creating dog walking fields, dog exercise fields. These again are using sort of areas of a farm which maybe aren't productive, or they're close to a village location, close to a population, and it's very much a case of using that corner of a pocket of a field, or a field somewhere where it's got good access, where people can go and walk their dogs. It's an outlay we found that the tenant pays for the outlay, the initial fencing costs. The landowner gets a decent rent per annum for a bit of land which generally they are not really getting any income through for each year. It might be a bit of sheep grazing, which can then be transferred into, we're seeing some decent rents for dog walking fields. That is, again, it's considering the location, the market. A key thing here is thinking about competitors. Have you got nearby fields? Has it got good access? And then it's the marketing. It's having that relationship between the two parties. And we've assisted in finding locations, in helping landowners get tenants in, get those professionals in who can deal with it. And we sort of facilitate and ensure that their relationship starts well, and it's a good long-term and something that develops into a growing business.
That's great. Any other examples?
Well, just taking general storage, we've got tenants that store boats for filming. We've got lots of farms that have diversified and have lockups. Again, going back to my original point about interaction with the farming business, that can mean that you get lots more people wandering into the farm at various times, so worth considering whether that's going to have a negative impact. General storage, workshops, we've got a aircraft restoration business in a former grain store, a truck servicing company in a grain store, scaffolders. There's no end. There's no end of people in storage buildings. Absolutely.
And we've also worked with farmers who they've got traditional buildings and they have a really successful wedding business. It's sort of overtaken their farming in terms of income and the direction that the business is going. But it's a great way to utilise the aesthetics of the buildings, the location, and it becomes it's a unique selling point, and it creates a place that people want to go to, and it's sort of place making, and that diversification has it's just grown and grown, and it's great for their business.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of people would like to get married.
Yeah,
overlooking rolling fields.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a lot to consider. Obviously, Robinson Hall are here to help you if you need any inspiration. There's lots of examples that we've touched on today, and I'm sure there's many more as well. But I guess key is just making sure that it works with your farm and the way in which you want to continue farming. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to touch on before we conclude?
I just think for a farming business, the majority are going to be family businesses, so it's key that everything is talked through as a family or with partnerships, and really take a look at the skills, the people you have, how it's going to develop long term, and it can become something that is positive and can take your farm maybe a new direction or just bolster it in a different way, and to create a more rounded business which can stand up to probably the many different things that are going to be thrown at farming over the next few years.
One thing that I just wanted to ask actually is, obviously because of all the changes to farming, is there any incentives, or do you think there'll be any incentives for farmers to diversify? I know that there's been some in the past. Is there anything looming that we're aware of?
In the past, there's been EU leader funding. Obviously, we are now out of the EU following Brexit. There's capital grants for concrete, going from the most basic point, so hard standing, creating that area which in the future can be used for lorries turning and everything like that. I should imagine that Labour government, we don't know, it's all very new. There may be new grants put forward. The Rural Payments Agency are obviously looking to sustainability with SFI and everything. I imagine that there will be some future funding coming forward. They're looking to make farming more sustainable, innovative, and push it forward. So I should imagine that there will be more grants added to the many grants that are available now. But at the moment, we just have to wait and see.
Wait and see. No, thank you. Okay. Thank you ever so much for tuning in and listening. There's a lot to think about. It's fair to say that diversification is key if you want to add more value to your assets, and as Alice touched on, look at your skill set of staff. Some of these diversification projects are overtaking the farming business. We're here to help if you need any advice. Alice, David Watling and David Sawford's contact details are on our website. The easiest place to find them is on the Meet the Team page. Please give them a call, send them an email, and obviously listen out to the other podcasts. There is one on permitted development rights as well, which might be worth a listen to if you are considering going down that route. And we've got many more podcasts to launch in the future. So please stay tuned, comment, engage, and I'll see you next time. Many thanks. Goodbye.